black rock is the dolerite hammer, and when Ben was just mentioning from underneath these scoop marks. So they wanted to claim that that's how they did it, that they were banging away with this rock, basically upwards.
For decades, we were told the Egyptians carved granite with nothing more than dolerite hammers. Slow, primitive, simple.
What they're probably for is they're probably for testing the quality of the granite, right? When you're looking for a giant single piece of granite.
Then AI analyzed the strange scoop marks at Aswan, and the results blew the old story apart. These cuts are too precise, too uniform, too advanced to come from pounding rock with stone tools. So what created them? A lost technique? Early technology we never knew existed? One thing is clear. Whatever happened in Aswan wasn't simple hammering, and AI may have just exposed a hidden chapter of ancient history. The quarry that shouldn't exist. At Aswan in southern Egypt, some 422 miles from Cairo, lies the ancient granite quarry.
To investigate some rarely seen and remarkable features of the ancient granite quarry at Aswan in Upper Egypt.
A place that feels less like an archaeological site and more like an abandoned work zone frozen mid-task. Scattered across its vast granite surface are half-carved blocks, half-finished projects, and tools left behind as if the workers suddenly disappeared mid-task. But one thing here catches everyone's attention: the strange curved marks that cover nearly every rock face. These are the famous Egyptian scoop marks. They appear everywhere. On the walls, deep inside narrow shafts, and on the unfinished obelisk, the largest known in Egypt. This massive stone, believed to have been commissioned by Queen Hatshepsut around 1500 BC, would have stood over 134.5 feet tall and weighed more than 1,000 tons if completed. British archaeologist Reginald Engelbach, who surveyed the obelisk in 1922, called its intended extraction one of the most ambitious engineering projects ever conceived in ancient times. The marks surrounding it are all the same size and depth, perfectly lined up in rows, even beneath the granite where it still connects to the bedrock. It's as if the tool that made them could slice through stone with ease. Archaeologists have long said these marks came from pounding with dolerite balls, a stone harder than granite. Demonstrations show that with enough strikes, granite can indeed be worn away. But what happens in practice doesn't match what's seen at Aswan. Hand-pounding leaves random dents, not perfect, even grooves that stretch in straight lines for dozens of feet. Then there are the deep test pits, some 40 feet down and barely wide enough for a person to stand. Their walls are lined with the same precise scoop marks from top to bottom. Working in such cramped spaces, with no air or light, and somehow keeping each groove identical seems impossible. The dust alone would have choked the space within hours. Yet the granite inside those shafts looks polished, not pounded. Even stranger, the marks around the unfinished obelisk show no difference in spacing or depth, though workers would have had to twist and crouch under a massive 1,000-ton slab to make them. Real hammering would have produced uneven results. These didn't. Over time, Egyptian quarrying methods changed, from these scoop marks to wedge and chisel techniques, then later to metal tools. Yet the older methods, supposedly more primitive, produced the largest and most flawless monuments. The more advanced the tools became, the smaller the projects got. Progress, oddly, seemed to move backward. For centuries, the scoop marks were ignored, just another unsolved mystery. But when AI recently analyzed their patterns, it discovered something hidden, a deliberate sequence carved into the granite, a pattern that might not just tell us how they worked, but who really taught them how. Shocking intelligence findings. For years, archaeologists could only guess how the strange scoop marks in the Aswan quarry were made.
Scoop marks? So how would you possibly achieve that with a hand stone hammer pounding away sideways in order to be able to?
But when AI examined them, it didn't just see granite, it saw patterns. Researchers fed thousands of high-resolution images into neural networks trained to detect manufacturing traces invisible to the human eye. The system wasn't influenced by theories or assumptions. It focused only on shape, depth, spacing, and texture. The results revealed order inside what looked like chaos. Each scoop mark followed the same path, same angle, same curve, and same exit point, repeated with near-machine accuracy thousands of times. Human pounding creates random dents and inconsistent depths. These marks, however, looked smooth, deliberate and uniform, as if made by a process that never hesitated or tired. Then came the unexpected twist. Under magnification, researchers noticed faint spiral traces inside each mark, subtle patterns that curved inward and then out again. That geometry didn't match the effects of hammering. It resembled the motion of a cutting tool moving with steady, guided rotation. When the system measured the spacing of these marks across quarry walls, it found striking precision, less than 5% variation across more than 100 feet. For context, experienced stonemasons working by hand typically achieve variation rates of 15 to 20% over similar distances. That level of control suggested guided movement, perhaps something that stabilized or directed the cutting path across long stretches of granite. For researchers accustomed to chisels and pounding stones, this was a major shift in perspective. Analysis of the geometric patterns has drawn comparisons to modern precision cutting methods, though direct technological parallels remain speculative. The consistency, the curved profiles, and the repeating geometry hinted at intentional technique rather than random impact. While nothing conclusively points to a specific mechanism, the marks don't behave like typical hand-tooled surfaces. They follow a rhythm that feels structured, as if shaped by a controlled, repeatable motion rather than improvised strikes. These findings didn't solve the mystery, but they reframed it. If the scoop marks truly reflect a level of precision difficult to achieve with simple tools, then the real question becomes broader. It's not only how the marks were made, but what kind of knowledge allowed ancient workers to produce such consistent results in one of the hardest stones on Earth. Beneath the granite. At first glance, the deep vertical shafts across the Aswan quarry look simple, just narrow holes in the rock.
You can still find many test holes at Aswan, which were dug using the scoop method, that were likely used to determine the quality of the granite.
Textbooks call them test pits, supposedly made by ancient quarry masters to check the quality of granite beneath the surface. Since upper layers were often cracked or weathered, they had to dig deeper to find stronger, cleaner stone for temples and obelisks. On paper, it sounds logical, but once you look closer, things stop making sense. Some of these pits go down 50 feet straight through solid granite, barely wide enough for one person to squeeze inside. Their walls are perfectly vertical, floors nearly level, and every inch is lined with the same smooth, curved scoop marks seen across the rest of the quarry. Standing above one feels like peering into a man-made void, dark, symmetrical, and unsettling. Now imagine being the worker inside. 3 feet of space, no light, no air circulation. According to mainstream theory, someone supposedly climbed down with a pounding stone and worked for months, striking granite blow by blow, while keeping every line perfectly straight. That alone stretches belief. Dust would have filled the shaft within minutes, choking anyone inside. With no ventilation, no tools for clearing debris, and no space to swing, it would have been impossible. Yet the walls remain flawless, no sign of fatigue, uneven strikes, or errors. Even more puzzling, every bit of granite removed had to be lifted through that same narrow opening, thousands of loads of rubble, just to test the rock. The effort doesn't match the explanation. That's where AI stepped in. Researchers modeled the pit dimensions and positions using geological software, and the results changed everything. The pits weren't random. They lined up precisely with natural fault lines and stress zones running through the granite. This observation was first made by Engelbach in the 1920s, though he had no explanation for how ancient workers identified these invisible structural features.
At the time that this work was supposedly being done, they basically only had bronze level of technology.
When visualized in 3D, they formed a clear grid, like a blueprint of the rock itself. Each shaft intersected the ideal fracture point for extracting large blocks with minimal effort. Whoever designed this system clearly understood how granite behaves under pressure, knowledge that today requires seismic mapping and subsurface modeling. Some pits even had side tunnels branching out horizontally, tracing dense crystal veins and avoiding weak zones. The AI determined these weren't random paths but intentional explorations, as if the builders could sense the stone's internal structure in real time. That level of precision goes beyond muscle and instinct. It hints at advanced tools capable of measuring and adjusting as they work. The plasma puzzle. Some researchers have noted that the scoop mark's smooth surfaces resemble thermal cutting more than mechanical abrasion. While this observation is intriguing, no archaeological evidence of high-temperature stoneworking tools has been found at Aswan. Still, the marks remain unusually uniform, curved, consistent, and lacking the shattered texture typically produced by hammering. The clean profiles have led some engineers to compare them with modern heat-altered stone, though such comparisons are limited and not definitive. The idea isn't that ancient workers used plasma or torches, but that the marks share certain visual traits with surfaces shaped by controlled heat. When engineers used clustered high heat systems on granite during modern experiments, they observed round basin-shaped depressions with softened inner contours and crisp upper edges. Between these cuts, thin ridges of untouched stone remained, forming patterns that loosely mirrored the grid-like impressions on the quarry walls at Aswan.
In this off-limits area, painted on the walls, might have been done long before the great dynastic Egyptian civilization ever began.
These similarities were visual rather than functional, prompting curiosity rather than conclusions. The trenches surrounding the unfinished obelisk also display vertical bands that curve smoothly at the bottom, a geometry that has been compared to the motion of a guided cutting head. The match is not exact, but the resemblance is close enough that some researchers have noted the parallel as a point worthy of further study. Even the channel widths, around 40 centimeters, align with spacing seen in certain modern multi-nozzle cutting demonstrations, though no direct link can be established. In contemporary practice, thermal tools such as flame jet cutters use oxygen fuel combustion to reach the extremely high temperatures needed to weaken granite's crystalline structure. These systems transformed stone cutting methods during the mid-20th century. Their underlying principle, using sustained heat to separate material, offers a useful comparison for understanding how certain textures can form, even if the ancient marks arose from entirely different means. The purpose of these comparisons is not to assign advanced machinery to the past, but to highlight that the Aswan marks don't resemble typical hand tool impacts. Their smoothness, curved geometry, and repetitive spacing suggest a controlled technique that may have involved more than simple hammering. With the dendera motif set aside and no speculative imagery involved, the puzzle returns to the granite itself. The marks appear shaped by a process that maintains steady direction and consistent pressure, leaving behind surfaces that look almost drawn rather than struck. If these patterns reflect a refined method rather than brute force, then the deeper question isn't about ancient devices, it's about ancient knowledge. Because if the workers of Aswan had mastered a technique capable of shaping granite with such precision, then the real mystery may lie not in discovering an unseen tool, but in understanding the principles they relied on long before metal chisels became common. Chemistry of the ancients. What if the real secret of the Aswan quarry wasn't only about muscle, but about matter itself, where chemistry and mechanics worked hand in hand? The deeper you look, the more the story starts to twist. Each groove in the granite, each curved scoop mark, feels like part of a bigger message left behind. Some say it was simple human effort, workers with bronze chisels, hammers, and patience, but others believe something else was at play. One theory making waves is the natron theory, proposed by researcher Marcel Foti. He suggests that the ancient Egyptians might have used more than tools. They may have used science. Natron, a naturally occurring mineral rich in sodium carbonate, was everywhere in ancient Egypt. It was used in mummification, cleaning, and glassmaking. So what if it also played a role in shaping stone? According to Foti, heating natron over granite could trigger a reaction with the rock's quartz, creating a layer of sodium silicate, also known as water glass. That would temporarily weaken the granite, making it easier to carve. Critics point out that no chemical residues from this process have been found in the quarry, though such traces might not survive thousands of years of weathering. The idea sounds wild, but not impossible. Chemical softening could explain some of the smoother curves and unusual surface textures found in Aswan's unfinished obelisk. AI imaging studies run by independent researchers in 2024 revealed unusual residue patterns on certain quarry marks, patterns that didn't match standard tool wear. Some even suggested they might point to both mechanical and chemical interaction. But then, there's another side to the debate. The precision of the cuts, the depth of the scoop marks, And the rotational patterns found in the granite all hint at something beyond chemistry, possibly mechanical. AI-assisted 3D scans have revealed striations that look strikingly similar to those made by rotary tools. Could it be that the builders used a combination of methods, a kind of lost hybrid technology, where heat, sound, and motion work together? Whatever it was, the evidence points to a sophistication far beyond what textbooks describe. And if that's true, then the next question is clear. What kind of machine could have made it possible? The replication problem. Here's the problem that still puzzles experts: the mysterious scoop marks at Aswan. For years, modern researchers have tried to copy them using the same primitive tools the ancient Egyptians supposedly had. They've spent hours hammering granite with dolerite stones. Stonemason Roger Hopkins attempted this for Nova in 1999, working 3 weeks to produce rough depressions that bore little resemblance to Aswan's uniform marks. The outcome always looks the same: rough, uneven dents. Each strike lands slightly off, each mark a different depth. They look human, clumsy, and tired. The real marks are smooth, identical, and unnervingly precise, as if carved by something that never stopped to rest. This failure forced experts to rethink everything. Some imagined massive wooden rigs that could lift and drop weights to strike granite with consistent force. It made sense on paper, same angle, same impact every time. But in practice, it fell apart. Building and moving such huge frames across a quarry would have been slow and awkward. And how would they even reach under unfinished obelisks, where the scoop marks continued seamlessly? It didn't add up. That wasn't ancient engineering. It was wishful thinking. So attention shifted to something bolder: vibration. What if the ancient tools didn't cut by impact at all, but by sound? Modern ultrasonic devices use high-frequency vibrations to separate molecular bonds, leaving behind flawless, glass-smooth surfaces. The resemblance to the Aswan marks is uncanny. Could the Egyptians have discovered a simpler version of this? It sounds unbelievable, but the scoop marks show no cracks or stress lines that come from brute force. Others went further, suggesting that focused solar energy, massive mirrors concentrating sunlight, could have softened the granite. It sounds far-fetched, yet ancient Egyptians did understand lenses and controlled heat long before metallurgy caught up. But again, the theory didn't fit every detail. That's where AI analysis came in. It ruled out simple pounding, chiseling, and grinding. The pattern showed a level of control and repetition that hinted at mechanical help, maybe even automation. The best working idea so far? A rotating cylindrical tool coated with a hard abrasive, pressing and spinning against the granite to form those distinct scoop shapes. The tool could slide along a fixed frame, just like a modern cutting machine, creating perfect uniform rows. But one question remains: where did they get the power to make it work? Because if they really did, then we're not just looking at lost tools, we're looking at lost technology. Egypt's missing masterpiece. The southern end of the Aswan quarry looks simple enough: a wide hollow carved deep into the rock. For decades, archaeologists believed it was an ancient harbor, a docking area where massive granite blocks were loaded onto boats and sent down the Nile. The theory made sense. Egyptians were master builders and planners. Creating a harbor right next to their quarry fit perfectly with their reputation for order and logic. But then came the closer look, and the cracks in that story began to show. The so-called harbor doesn't connect to any river or canal. It's actually too high above the historical water level of the Nile. There's no sign of a waterway, no channel leading to the river. For it to work as a harbor, workers would have had to dig an entire system of canals or haul blocks across long distances, a method that seems unnecessarily complicated for such practical engineers. Something didn't add up. That's when a new possibility emerged. The hollow wasn't a harbor at all. It was a quarry pit, a place where stone had been removed, not where boats had docked. The clue was in the rock itself. The walls and floor carried the same distinct scoop marks found across Aswan. The marks ran in neat vertical lines, showing that workers or something had cut downward, removing material layer by layer. The pattern fits extraction, not construction. Even the pit's proportions matched other quarried areas, not any harbor known from ancient times. Then came the discovery that changed everything: the red ochre paintings. Faint but still visible, they decorated parts of the depression's walls with birds drawn in a unique pre-dynastic style. That design dated back to a time long before the pharaohs. centuries or even millennia earlier. When dynastic Egypt rose, this art style disappeared, replaced by formal hieroglyphics, which means if these paintings came after the stone was removed, then the quarrying itself had to be older than Egypt's first kings. However, the painting's chronological relationship to the quarrying remains is debated, as they could have been added to an already ancient site. When engineers measured the site, the numbers were staggering. Based on its size and structure, the stone that once filled that hollow could have weighed up to 5,000 tons. Based on the depression's volume and granite's density, the removed stone could have weighed approximately 5,000 tons, though this assumed the pit was originally filled to ground level. For comparison, the heaviest blocks at Giza weigh around 80 tons, and the largest known obelisks around 500. Nothing in ancient records mentions the transport of anything close to that size. And yet, if the block was ever taken, there's no trace of it, no debris, no fragments, no transport path. It simply vanished. AI analysis later revealed something even stranger. The oldest marks, the deepest ones near this harbor, showed the most precision, the strongest signs of rotational cutting, and traces of hard abrasive material. Higher up the quarry walls, the patterns grew rougher and less exact. Technology didn't advance here, it declined. The oldest work was the most advanced. The harbor wasn't a dock, it was a cradle, the mold of a vanished masterpiece taken long before the first pyramid was ever built. And that leaves one haunting question. If they could move a 5,000-ton block, what else did they build? And where is it now? When history hit reset. The deeper archaeologists study Aswan's granite quarries, the more the historical picture shifts. What once appeared to be a straightforward rise in Egypt's stoneworking skill now looks uneven. The scoop marks, long treated as primitive, appear on some of the most precise and ambitious works ever attempted, while later periods left behind smaller and noticeably rougher pieces. Instead of consistent progress, the record shows a kind of technical narrowing, as though certain methods gradually faded rather than evolved. AI studies added a new layer to this discussion. When researchers analyzed the patterns, the earliest examples displayed the most consistent spacing, the clearest rotational traces, and the most refined surfaces. Curiously, later marks lacked these characteristics. That means if a specialized technique existed, its most advanced form may have appeared early and then diminished over time. The pattern of technical decline is documented but debated. Some Egyptologists attribute it to political fragmentation and resource depletion in later periods. Others suggest specific techniques were lost when master craftsmen died without trained successors. Either way, the evidence points to a shift rather than a linear increase in capability. The Aswan quarry may reflect a moment when highly trained teams employed precise, disciplined methods that did not survive unchanged into later eras. AI didn't offer speculative conclusions, it simply highlighted patterns, geometry, spacing, and consistency that had gone unnoticed. These findings don't rewrite Egypt's history, but they do raise valid questions about how certain skills were taught, maintained, and eventually altered across generations. Every scoop mark represents a technique that ancient craftsmen mastered but didn't record in writing, leaving us to puzzle out their methods from the marks themselves. This perspective also reframes other sites. The basalt boxes of Saqqara, the tight joints of the Valley Temple, and the clean drill marks at Abu Rawash may not be isolated feats, but examples of specialized craftsmanship that peaked at certain periods and later waned. Rather than pointing to lost civilizations, these cases might reflect how complex methods can fade when political, economic, or cultural conditions shift. If AI can detect the subtle signatures left behind in granite, then the next breakthroughs may come not from uncovering new artifacts, but from re-examining familiar ones with advanced tools. We hope you enjoyed this video. Stay tuned for more amazing stories.